As we mark the anniversary of Hurricane Harvey, we remember not just the staggering rainfall and historic flooding, but also the long road to recovery that followed. Harvey was a wake-up call, exposing deep vulnerabilities in our infrastructure and, just as critically, in how resources are distributed across our communities. Joining us now is Harris County Commissioner Rodney Ellis. He's been a key advocate for using an equity-focused approach to flood control and making sure that our investments in resilience reach the neighborhoods that need them most. Commissioner Ellis, welcome back to
Thank you.
Houston. How are you?
Good to be with you, even if it is an anniversary we'd all like to forget.
Yes, but unfortunately, some people are still paying for that. I mean, it's been a long road to get where we have been today.
A very long road. You go back and look, $158 billion in damage. Now, if you went and took Carla and other storms, I think of Carla, that's the first one I can remember. It tells you I'm a true Houstonian if I can go back that far. And you did it in today's dollars. I'm not sure how it would play out, but look, a lot of pain, and it's going to take a lot of time to get beyond it.
Well, and, people, I think after Carla didn't really recognize just the post-traumatic storm syndrome is what I call it. But the effects of the Memorial Day flood and then the Tax Day flood and then the Harvey flood, our city went through a lot. And I would go speak to groups and have people would be in tears saying, please tell me it's not going to flood again.
And you've been around a long time. So now, I hope you're one of those believers. Climate change is real. So you're old as I am, we are maybe. And you go back and say, Carla, that was really a big deal. But then all of those other incidents, all in such close proximity to one another. Something is happening, and we all have to prepare for it.
And it used to be that we would get a hurricane once every 20, 25 years. When you think about it, that was kind of spaced out like that.
A major.
Yeah, a major one, yeah. And one of the problems with that is that the sense of urgency simply goes away.
It's generational.
Yeah, right.
Each generation gets that storm, then you forget about
Doug,
it.
when we had too many, you remember, then we weren't prepared.
Right.
When they come back to back, after Katrina, you remember when all those people died trying to get out?
Rita.
With Rita.
Yeah.
And then when you have too many in succession, it's our ability to stick to one thing at a time is a challenge. Not just for those of us in public life or in the media. And with so many distractions coming at us, it's a big issue.
But, when you get a major hurricane once every 20, 25 years, like I say, the sense of urgency goes away. Mm-hmm. Do you sense any greater sense of urgency in the public, people you talk to? Have they it's been a few years since Harvey, or they're not paying as much attention? Do you see a lessening?
I think that anxiety is there. Mm-hmm. How could it not be? Anytime it's raining, look, to the extent, I don't know if I see it, I feel it. So it's sort of like my street is always flooded. I'm just in one of those areas in the medical center where it happens all the time. But now a couple of staffers whose cars have gotten flooded out, I feel anxiety. So I think when I talk to people, they tell me about it, but I'm sure it's real. After you have an incident like that, a lot of mental health issues that people take a very long time to get over.
Well, and the derecho in May of 2024, followed by Beryl in July.
And who'd ever heard of a derecho?
Right.
Yeah.
You get a brand new term.
Well, and then you have the issue of power outages, and how long is that going to last? And you're in the throngs of summer, and it's so hot and oppressive. But we're still feeling the after effects after all these years of a big one like Harvey.
That's why the issue that you started with, I think, is so important. When you talk about the equity framework, which I know you want to talk about, I didn't know what cost-benefit ratio meant until I became a county commissioner. I've been in the Senate for a very long time, and the head of flood control called me in as a new county commissioner. He said, I think you can really help us. And then he walked me through cost-benefit ratio, which is a nice phrase. It sounds like, of course, you want to get the biggest bang for your buck. And then he was saying, it's awful. Everybody I talk to in the Corps of Engineers, they think it's a problem. In a bipartisan way, everybody says it's a problem. Here's what cost-benefit ratio means. It means that you take care of the most expensive property first. But small problem. You never get to the areas that flooded first, that flooded most often. So when he walked me through it, I didn't catch it the first time. It was just so illogical. Maybe the third time I caught it. And I said, okay, you think I can help? How? He said, well, you know Washington, D.C., you worked up there a long time ago. You know a lot of members of Congress. And so I did a little research. Cost-benefit ratio, as best I can tell, in part came from an executive order that goes back to Ronald Reagan that I think was misinterpreted. I had a staffer do the research on it. But there was an executive order wanting to be efficient on how you spend flood dollars as it relates to federal money. And over the years since I was a staffer when that executive order came down, about maybe 1980 or 81, I was working on Capitol Hill for Congressman Leland. And everybody follows that. The state money chases it just for water events, not necessarily a wind event or an earthquake, but for a water event. All around the country use cost-benefit ratio. And so when I explained it to a couple of members of Congress, and I said, well, maybe somebody should have brought that up to me, and I should have gone when Barack Obama was president and said, why don't y'all look at this? It turns out both parties have tried to change it, but it's stuck in the DNA of how you spend money. And so somebody said to me, one member of Congress who remained nameless, he said, well, if that was the case, how would they ever have done Sims Bayou over in Sunnyside after Carla, which I'm very familiar with? That's the only one that didn't breach. They did it as an earmark. And it was earmark Congressman Mike Andrews, if you can go back that far. Barbara Jordan tried, couldn't get it done. Mike Andrews was representing that area when it finally got done. But we no longer have earmarks. One member said, well, you don't have earmarks now. You can get a much smaller amount, but nothing on the magnitude of what it would take. When we passed the Harvey bond issue, the two watersheds that came up consistently were Greens and Halls, because those two watersheds flood on every event. Obviously, they're in a low-income neighborhood. And even Braze, it took a long time to meet the cost-benefit ratio standard. Now, look, I'm a sensible person. If you have a medical center, it's a good thing to have. You ought to protect that. If you have a downtown, wherever it is, it's nice to have one. If you're worried about flooding, if you had a watershed near, the county's responsibility would be the watersheds. If you have flooding near your airport, it'd be nice to have a way to get out of here. You know, if you have a university corridor, not necessarily if a university is spread out in every area, but if you got a corridor, like take New Orleans. Of course you ought to protect downtown New Orleans. You ought to protect your port if you're worried about that. But beyond that, how could we still be stuck in that mindset of cost-benefit ratio? So what I did was I asked for some simple language. It passed in a bipartisan manner. All 5 of us on Commissioner's Court voted in the enabling document for Harvey that we would not follow cost-benefit ratio. The language said something to the effect we'd come up with an equitable framework for distribution of those proceeds, and we would follow it. I didn't try to define the framework. I'm not sure I'd have gotten 4 votes. That's what my staff said, because here's how most people define equity. It means they get more. They do. Most of us are like that. And if you don't get more when you're a politician, then you say divide it equally. And if somehow you come up with an equity framework and you think you'll get more, you're for a framework. But when you come up with a formula, if you don't get more, I watch it all the time, every couple of weeks. Then you just say divide it equally. That Commissioner's Court voted on that unanimously. The other thing that I wanted was I thought the county ought to have a program for minority and women-owned businesses. So I said, you got to do this disparity study that's required by the courts. And they agreed to do it, both. And I happen to have been the only person in this political party that I'm a member of on that court. And then when we developed a framework with buy-in, we brought in experts. I mean, look, how do you define equity? I thought you ought to use this notion of LMI, low to moderate income. I'm just accustomed to that back when I was on city council. HUD money, so-called CDBG, you know what I'm talking about. That HUD money would go out on a LMI, low to moderate income. You wouldn't give them all of it, but you have some equity framework, or you come up with a version of worse first. You know, these phrases come in handy. Then you hear other phrases. You watch them. Shovel ready.
Yeah.
What's shovel ready? The neighborhoods who had the advantage, by and large. Or they had a pretty skillful politician who could make them shovel ready. But if you were shovel ready, that means you were following cost-benefit ratio. So the formula we came up with had a host of factors in there. It wasn't one that I designed, but it was the best one we could come up with. And we voted. A majority of the court voted to do it. And I knew all along we didn't have enough money. There were studies coming out of the Kinder Institute for up to $25-30 billion. $2.5 billion was a lot of money. Largest local bond issue for a flood-related event in the history of Texas. But based on the studies and the news accounts, it was not enough. But so what I've been advocating with my colleagues is that we'll have to go back at some point. We divided this money into, don't call them quartiles. Who knows what a quartile is? They're not evenly divided anyway. Let's say we divided them into 4 buckets, following the formula. And I've been saying at least complete as many buckets as you can. You voted in the framework, you'd have an equity prioritization framework. You developed one. And if you didn't follow it, if you didn't complete as many buckets as you can, good luck when you go back. So if we do what I think we're on track to do, we will complete 1 bucket. And it'll make a big difference. Now, other buckets, the other 3, they're not quartiles because they're not divided evenly. So the big blow up we had at court probably added a couple of $100 million to bucket 1. And I've made this simple argument. When you go back to the voters to ask for more funding, if you can't say you at least completed 1 of the areas that you said you were going to complete, how do you convince them to trust you again? And that's really the simple proposition.
We're talking to Commissioner Rodney Ellis about the anniversary of Hurricane Harvey and learning a lot about economics at the same time. If you'd like to join the conversation, 713-440-8870. We do have Kenneth on the line for you. Kenneth, welcome to Hello Houston.
Thank you. I've been here as long as you have, and I'm a child of Hurricane Harvey. And since then, what flooded then don't flood now. And I think it should be a geological approach to flooding and city planning, which I don't hear nothing about. Because right now, this city, what's above ground is outpacing what's below ground. And I've been sounding this alarm because, see, I know this area pretty well, and I can you can pretty much do a show on the changes in the geological makeup of this city. And I really believe, man, we need to look way down the road and start looking on how we're going to deal with this, because you have a type of land subsidence here where what was at one elevation a decade ago, it's somewhere else later on. And I think it should be approached that way, and we take a look at that and how it's going to get paid for, And thank you for the time. And I just wanted to bring that up because I think that's a very serious thing to look at. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So there is a lot of concrete around here.
He raised a lot of good points. It's complicated also because the county's responsibility would be the watersheds, the bayous. The city's responsibility would be to get the water out of your neighborhood to the watersheds. Now, the county has made a good decision, I believe. We've helped the city in some of those areas. But our primary responsibility would be the watersheds. And look, I hope that if at some point we can't do our job, if the city could get if they use their drainage fee the way they told the voters they were going to use it, it would help. It wouldn't solve it all. But remember, because it's bifurcated, it confuses people.
Right.
And if somebody has a problem, they just met. In unincorporated areas, that's on us. In addition to the Harvey flood bond issue, we pass the strongest building construction standards in the region, Atlas 14. And we pretty much asked, and requiring more detention bases. It raises the cost of being able to develop projects. The city followed us. We had to make some changes on what they do in terms of what we do. Montgomery County did. Most others have, because we said, we're not going to partner with you unless you do that. But let me make this broad point. I don't think the good Lord planned for us to have 5 million people this close to the Gulf of Mexico in a flat area and then put all this concrete in. But I can't change that. Maybe the good Lord can. But we're here now. And so if we thought about it when Carla came, whoever the folks were in power then, there are a lot of things we do differently. Even when we added our toll roads, which help. So you can get all around more concrete. And anytime you have impervious cover, the water has to go somewhere. Take New Orleans, since we made reference to Katrina. Who would have thought you'd have that many people sitting right there? But we've done it. And, if another Harvey comes through, there's still going to be challenges. So we got to do the best that we can. We work as well as we can. It doesn't look like we'll have as much federal support. You get another disaster, based on what I'm seeing. It won't be, hey, you were in the weather forecasting business. You probably know better than I would. We find out when you do certain freezes, layoffs, well, what happens? Some of it's a guess, by the way. But, you make an educated. What was this phrase? Geological, even in the weather business, science helps you predict. Science is not always right. There are factors that you don't know. But look, we made a difference, and we got a lot more to do. So I appreciate Mr. Kenneth calling in, but, I just want to make the point. Yeah, of course, who in their right mind would build this much concrete? We slowed down somewhat, but, it's a big problem.
Have we learned any lessons from Harvey? Are we just going to sit and wait for the next one to come along?
I'd say a big lesson that the county, my part, a big lesson that we learned was you got to pay for it. You can't always wait on big brother or big sister. Yeah. Was it 85% of the people, 85% of the voters passed? By the way, I will mention a mistake that I made. I thought it was an error to have that election in August because I know who normally votes on bond issues. I'm not guessing. You can go pull the numbers and see. And it's generally the neighborhoods who've gotten the least. The neighborhoods who benefited from cost-benefit ratio normally were the more affluent neighborhoods, and they vote against those issues. The neighborhoods who got the least, for some reason, had more faith in government, or they were just so scared, they figured whatever you do, they voted for it. And I was afraid in a lot of those more conservative areas, maybe they were on vacation, they were out of town. Now, that 85% was impressive, but it was the smallest number of people voting for the largest flood bond issue in the history of the state. And we had to spend $1 million to have a special election. I argued against that. And I was so angry, maybe a little impetuous, I was going to vote against it. And one of my colleagues who didn't care that much for me at the time stopped me after I voted and said, I want you to really think about what you're doing. He basically saying you got what you wanted.
Well, I sense, Commissioner, that Houstonians during that time were just surviving, right, in the wake and the aftermath of Harvey, still cleaning up after the mess and getting into their homes and not really thinking, the average citizen thinking, I got to go to the polls, I got to do this. They're just surviving, right?
Well, I think by and large, because it is their money, normally I would just favor letting the largest number of people vote. Now state law wouldn't even let you make that exception. That has been changed. But we were lucky it passed, and I'm glad it passed. But the point I'm answering is, yeah, that was big. That was huge. For the voters in Harris County and for the politicians to go say, yeah, we got to have more money, and we're going to go do this. Now, in some ways, because the list was thrown together so quick, a lot of things were thrown up in the air, and some people would think commitments were made. There's no way we could have done all those projects that were on the shelf for $2.5 billion. We were not going to draw in that much federal money. And going forward, we won't have as much. But I think there is enough attention on the issue of flooding in Houston. Then you got others that come in, by the way. How about snow? You know what I mean?
Freeze.
How about
how about a derecho?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We haven't had the fire issue lately, but I can remember the certain parts of Texas where you have fire issues from a drought. But hey, I just believe climate change is real. It's going to cost a lot of money. It's going to take a lot of folks working together, and it won't be an easy fix.
No.
just
getting everybody on the same page is not going to be an easy fix.
And getting us to change our habits.
Yeah.
You know, we got to decide, you know, more people are still coming, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
So, you know, hey, you got to figure out what you do to not have to build so much concrete. But they're coming.
It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah,
Hey, good to be with you all three of you.
Good to see you.